stage is set with Dr. Ranga's speech and, of course, the very, very inspiring speech from Dr. Sudeep Gupta. Tata Memorial always does us proud. How much we should write about it is a question. Last I had met Dr. Badwe. He also spoke to me about how frugal innovation actually makes such a huge difference. And that's where probably the promise of Muzaffarpur is also coming up. So thank you so much for being there, sir. In fact, that's again the question that will be coming up now again and again. In fact, Pharma is also a platform for friends to meet. So we have all of them as friends. And of course, there are so many there on the other side. So thank you so much. Driving into the question of cost-based to value-based, as I had mentioned, this topic has not been approached in the threadbare way that we are actually trying to do this time. In the given time, which will be probably around 30-35 minutes before Bhavna comes and tells me to wrap up. So, okay. So, we always talk about patient first, and so we will have to take the patient group first. Alpana, what have been your experiences as being part of QRSMA Foundation? The group that you represent actually has done a lot of toil and struggles obtaining drugs, and the modalities that I had actually mentioned before has also changed so much. So there are drugs which were required from infusion side now all the way to orals. How has been the experience, if you can quickly tell us?
So thank you. Thanks a lot, Vinay, for the question, Vikasji for the question, and thanks a lot, ET, for the opportunity. I'm Alpana Sharma, co-founder and trustee of QRSM Foundation of India, and I'm also mother of a boy who has spinal muscular atrophy. My journey with this genetic condition started with diagnosis of my son. And I have been joined with many other parents and mothers especially. So we are 5 mothers from 5 different locations working on this. And this disease is a genetic condition which is, #1 genetic killer. And 10 years or 12 years back, there was no treatment for this, but all thanks to scientific research, and I would also like to thank the pharma companies, to come up with research for these rare diseases. And when we talk about patients or patients' perspective, I would say it's mandatory to shift from cost-based to value-based, because then only we'll be able to focus on the patient outcome. When we talk about rare diseases or any disease in general, also the cost, because it's out-of-pocket payment in India, so the costs are supposed to be high. But if we compare it to the value that it will have on a patient's life, many of our children are exceptionally bright. A few of them, Anushka Panda, my colleagues, Archana's daughter, Pratyush Nalam, Sri Lakshmi Nalam's son, they are working with Microsoft, Google. These children are asset to the country. So if they are given, these drugs, maybe one-time gene therapy or many other drug, we should not, I don't think looking at cost makes a sense, because the kind of contribution they will give back to the economy of the country is going to be much more better. So we need to have, a better for the patient outcome from the care perspective also. The Indian pharma should shift on value, and for that, we'll need to get all the stakeholders together. So thanks again, Vikasji and ET for this. But we'll need, from the payer's perspective, the challenges that we see. We have petitioned in High Court, Supreme Court. There has been a lot of advocacy journey in this. But somewhere we need to let the insurance or the government see the value to the patient outcome in terms of that. So if we can get the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, and especially the payers, to agree to this, that would be helpful. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thanks so much, Alpana. Value being the central proposition, there is a lot happening which we do not know exactly, but a lot of changes are actually happening in the market. The way drugs are getting access, the way pharma companies are actually making these drugs available. One quick question, except of course Yogesh, not included, to the house. Anyone knows which is the biggest drug in the Indian market? Any clues you would like to take? Sir, not you. You will know it. And of course, the clue is in the, yeah, of course, go ahead. If you're not part of that company, then I don't want to include you. So, all right. So it's Keytruda, a blockbuster of blockbusters, $25 billion in sales. Rehan has the mantle of actually putting that drug in the market in India. It's about close to 1,400 or 1,500 crore. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that number, but yes, so last I saw Augmentin was about 850 crore. I don't know what to say about that. It's like a lot of people are popping antibiotics, but 1,500 crore is what Keytruda is, and one of the most expensive drugs, of course, but the 40 indications in all, I don't know whether we should stop counting that or still count. So your journey in this, it must have been a real task to put that drug in the market in the way it needs to be put. So, Rehan.
Hi. Can you hear me? Vikas, let me just take us back maybe 5 or 7 years ago when we first launched the drug. Globally, today, we have something like 40 indications in 17 tumor types. In India, we have 10 tumor types and 17 indications, and we'll continue to register them. So I think the couple of things that are really important to understand this before we talk about commercials and those kind of things. Number one is how many different types of major cancers can we address and register? And I think our government has been very helpful, our regulatory bodies have been very helpful in registering those indications quite quickly. Second piece is access, right? And everybody talks about it. There's a lot of dialogue and debate about access, but ultimately access comes down to people who need the drug most can afford it. And how do you do that? You can, provide a broad, reduction in price. You can do through, products. And what we've done is we've said, okay, look, the people who deserve it most, below a certain amount of income, objectively verified, should be able to get that. So we have a third-party NBFC institution that evaluates any patients who gets in, and within 24 hours to 36 hours, that evaluation can happen, and the patient will be given the drug, right? As far, obviously, they pay a part of that. This is quite an interesting program because nothing really has been tried of this model before in India. We launched it about 2.5 years ago, tested it with a few hospitals, then a few cities, and then went national. Now, 80% of our patient population accesses this much reduced price as a result of this program. So that's the first point. And the second point is this is now national. So we launched it nationally about a year and a half ago. And what ended up happening is we were launching it nationally. We did it slowly, and we got a lot of positive feedback from doctors saying, get it to our city as soon as possible. So I think not thinking of the commercial piece. That's not the most important piece. The most important piece is if we do a great job serving as many patients, and we are serving about 10 times the number of patients in 2 years. So as we've launched it, the objective is to do this in a very broad way. And third point is this cannot be done only in the private market. So we partner very actively with a number of government accounts, and we're doing this much more actively. And I think when we look forward, the real explosion of access will come from really partnering with government in a much more broader way.
And possibly going forward, some of the other neighboring countries will also replicate the same model.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an access program is now across Asia, similar to ours. Product is not registered in Pakistan or Bangladesh today, but we obviously get many more. India gets 500,000 patients, as all of you know, coming in for medical tourism. So through that, certainly, many more patients can get access.
Sure, right. To your right, Rehan, sir, value versus cost has been a perennial debate between us. You have always been a big advocate of value. When will it happen? And now companies are actually realizing in that direction that we need to go beyond the pill. A lot of companies are actually doing a lot of things that go beyond the pill. Do you think this balance between cost and value can be achieved in India?
Good morning, everyone. I think this is not my dress is not the cause of leaving MNCs and joining Indian industry. I have to go somewhere it comes. So I want to give you some information which will probably be a little more provocative and make the debate more interesting through the day. I can tell you, patients are fed up with us. This is a fact of life. I think whatever we might say today, patients are fed up with us. I'll give you some stark statistics for us to understand why we say so. 1 out of every 5 women get treated in this country for illness. 1 out of every 2 men get treated for illness in this country. You can imagine, therefore, percentage of people getting treated in this country. Even in chronic therapy, you get roughly 35 to 40% people who are debilitated by the disease getting treated. So the percentage is very low. Even when they are getting treated. Let's take diabetes for an example, and Dr. Joshi will be here. Imagine that 80% of the people get acute treatment and 20% of the people actually get chronic treatment. 1% GDP decrease every year happens due to mismanagement of diabetes and hypertension in this country. And for all the roads we create 0.5% increase in GDP. This debate never happens in our country, and the reason being that we really don't focus on value. Value and access are the most important debate in our country, while we continuously talk about cost. And I'll tell you by a few examples that why we should focus on value. You know, in 2009, I did an experiment, 2009 and 10, on diabetes. And they, with a very solid, committed team, we did an experiment to see in control group, if patients are counseled, given right counseling, given right exercise advice, given right diet, nutrition advice, how do they respond to treatment? And patients who don't get this, how do they respond to treatment? First of all, the increase of taking regular medication from 138 days in the group that doesn't get counseling increased to 248 days per year. You can see the stark difference. Everything, HbA1c, you take blood pressure, cholesterol, every possible measurement was better. Nobody asked us what is the price of the drug. Nobody ever asked us what is the price of the drug. Similar experiment in schizophrenia. I really went deep into schizophrenia and found out that there are simple injections once in 3 months to take. But the kind of social inclusion of schizophrenia patients that happened because of taking that injection properly and regularly was tremendous. 6 out of 10 patients started getting socially inclusive and their family social life became dramatically better. But we keep in this country talking about price of drugs. We have to realize that we have the lowest price of drugs in the world. We should stop this debate. There is no need to discuss price of drugs in this country anymore. There will always be people who will face access issues. We need to do more and more to create more access, because that's the paying mechanism that we have to solve for, not the price of the drug. We need to solve the paying mechanism. So I hope that we start focusing on the real issues that our country faces. Patients are becoming consumers because of our behavior. Patients are driving more and more self-medication. Patients are driving more and more trying to take treatment in their own hands. Discussion with doctors has changed. Dr. Gupta showed a stark picture of access. You know, the heat map was very stark. We want patients to come to us while we should be going to patients. So I hope, I see that happening now because patients are forcing us, but the debate will move completely to value-based treatments rather than cost-based treatments as it would happen, because we will be forced into that situation now. And I am seeing a behavioral change. I hope in next 5 years we really demonstrate that in a much higher way.
Right, thank you so much, sir. Why I called you for the first comment was, I remember 2008. So a small anecdote. Januvia was launched by sir and his team, and the entire team had come to our office. At that time I was with CNBC, and the price was 43 so per tablet, right? 41 or 43. I was actually thinking, you know, something is wrong. They have gone out of their heads. And I had put the copy in the evening, and the desk rewriter actually came and said, is this 430 or 43? I said, no, it's 43. And I asked him, is this even possible? How will you sell this product? 43 rupees per tablet. It went on to become another blockbuster. So, yeah. So, I mean, there is value, and you have to find that. So, and again, DPP-4 again became the standard treatment going forward. So, right. Next to you, Amitabh. Again, Entresto in the US created waves with its value-based pricing, which again became a big talk, and all the companies ran to procure to get the brand. Today we know how the market is. The entire paradigm has changed in congestive heart failure. All of them are doing so well. It also gives us a feeling that there is a lot of demand for products which are already not there. If you can tell us, because now you have the next generation gene silencing drug also, which is again creating a lot of buzz in the market, inclisiran. How do you want to see this value proposition going forward?
So first of all, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So good morning, everyone. A big thanks to ET to inviting me for this meeting, and thanks, Vikas, for having me here. The first point I want to make it very, very clear that it's not that India can transition from cost to value-based. India has to transition from cost to value-based, because a value-based system is going to keep patient at the center of all the treatment outcomes that's going to happen. And that's extremely important from a patient perspective. Coming to the example that, Vikas, you mentioned about Entresto. Entresto changed the way heart failure patients were getting treated earlier. Most of the patients who had low ejection fraction had very little life to live. With the drug, which came at 1/5 of the price of the global markets in India, it transformed the way heart failure patients were being treated. They had their ejection fractions back, especially in relapsed ejection fraction group of patients, and they were able to live their life like a normal human being. And that was extremely important from a disease treatment perspective. But what is also important to know that only 5% of heart failure patients today have access to earning. And it's not the cost. Because we have more than 50 generics in the market. Today we have Entresto. There's a better problem to address rather than just the cost-based efficiency. And that is something that we together in India need to tackle. I want to give another example, Vikas, of a drug. 20 years back, chronic myeloid leukemia was a deadly cancer for blood. Today, it's more like a chronic disease. And the reason for that is basically because we have moved from cost-based treatment to value-based treatment. In 2000, we were the first company to launch imatinib with a global support program, which today have more than 100,000 patients getting the drug free of cost. And this drug transformed the way chronic myeloid leukemia was treated. We further developed into the science and came with second-generation TKIs, and today we have a third-generation drug to treat chronic myeloid leukemia. But what has changed in the treatment is not that the patient requires the treatment lifelong. I have a very closely known person who was just married, was detected by chronic myeloid leukemia, was put on a second-generation TKI. 3 years down the line, his disease was undetectable, and the doctor put him off the treatment, and 5 years down the line, he is off the drug. Look at the impact that could have on a person who was earlier told, just married, that you have a blood cancer, and today he is not on a drug, he's off the drug, he's living a normal life, and that's the response of a value-based treatment when you keep patient outcomes at the center.
Vinay sir, your turn. So from the other angle of also attempting drugs which are given for a narrow band of patients, how do you see this coming to you? There will be specialization in what you do in plasma products. At the same time, you have this huge patient population to serve. In the innovation switch, do you see that as a barrier?
Yeah, so I think we have been largely present in plasma proteins and biosimilars, which is more of generic space. And we have openly embraced price controls in India, and we have seen dramatic effect for access to patients. Some of the biologics that were being sold for few thousand rupees are now being sold for few hundred. And usage has gone up from few thousands or lakhs to millions of patients. So we definitely see that as a big factor in providing access. Having said that, we are also working in some novel therapy areas like gene therapy, vaccines and antibodies in orphan disease areas. And there we definitely see value coming into play. Affordability is different in different countries. Everywhere patients are looking and payers are looking for affordability, be it US or Europe. But affordability in India is at a different level. Definitely gene therapies are not sustainable at the pricing points that we have in US, Europe, 5 crores, 10 crores. But definitely we need to move to value-based pricing for such novel ideas. And here I think all the stakeholders in healthcare system need to understand what the value is. As some of my fellow colleagues mentioned, these treatments provide huge benefit and they really dramatically change lives of people. But I think apart from drug manufacturers, patients, payers, doctors and hospitals also need to chip in and look at the overall healthcare cost of any particular therapy so that we derive the best value. And if there is a congruence of all the stakeholders, it will be easier rather than just asking the pharma companies to continue to look at costs and reducing price. So I think there's a huge scope.
Right. So going forward, you will also be happy to be known more on the innovative side. Is that the direction going forward because of the higher weightage that you see in value?
Yes, it's a long haul. Of course, we are an independent company, though part of Reliance Group. We are on our own feet. So that's why our initial focus has been in the area of biosimilars and plasma proteins. But now when we are getting into new areas, especially vaccines, we are working on some very good niche areas and even gene therapy. So our focus will shift as we progress from. We will not reduce our focus on plasma proteins and biosimilars because that still is of a great importance to a country like India, but we will have many more therapies and drugs coming in the novel space.
Right. So from the time we saw the first cell and gene therapy product, Nexcar 19, which was about 45 lakh at that time, it's already come down to around 26 lakh rupees. So, and it probably, as we scale, it will still keep coming down. And someone had mentioned that, we should have it at around 5 or 10 lakh rupees. So it's really going to be a bigger impact. Dr. Gautam Khanna, sir, you have to wear the hospital's hat. Probably not all your folks here, but from the hospital side, you see that change or some kind of opposition to the value shift that we want to see? As in, like, is it like the lowest cost healthcare better for India, or do you want that to be shifted? Because, most of the healthcare institutions today have gone in the hands of private equity, barring a few. So there is a lot of profit that is being seen in hospitals. So from that angle, what do you want to say?
Vikas, thank you for asking questions. And first, let me just reiterate what I heard from my friends here and Alpana ji for all the noble work you're doing. So I completely believe that there is a need to move towards value-based. So let me give you a first positive. They've talked about the pharma, but let me give you a simple devices kind of things, which the simple thing which people have seen, it's crept in. Like a diabetes, you talked about diabetes, Sanjiv talked about diabetes. The strip which was used to check the blood sugar, like 15, 20 rupees a strip. So in a month, even if you use one, it's like 400, 500 rupees. Now move to CGM, which is, I think, close to twice a month, which is around 10,000 bucks. So slowly that change is happening. So people have not realized it suddenly from 500 rupees to 10,000 rupees, but there is value in it and people are adopting it. There is another example I'll give you. The type 1 diabetes in children. We have started a research and a program to look at that, and we enrolled and we found that the average HbA1c was 11.2 for the kids. But with more, like you mentioned, with more education, more diagnosis, more counseling, more monitoring of the drugs, etc., it has come down to 8.2. So that's a rapid progress. We've had examples of using, driving the value through the robot, and I think Dr. Gupta talked about how many linacs. So like a linac, what are the things? So those are all, I agree with all of them. I mean, like we had a gamma knife, which is much superior, some of you know. But I have a point. We have the example of Muzaffarpur, which you talked about, and we have an example of Cuff Parade, means, the South Bombay. So in India, one part is the South Bombay and one part is the Bihar. So there is that India which needs value and cost both. Now, if we say that everything goes to value, it's not going to happen. Because the reason why it's not going to happen is, you talked about affordability. I would add to that, I say it is not affordability, it is the ability to pay, ability to afford. Somebody has to pay for it. So if I administer a drug which is 4 lakhs or 10 lakhs or whatever, somebody has to pay for it. Whether it is in Tata, some grant is coming, whether it is the government of India, whether it is some NGO. So if we are thinking that we are going to make, and I have mentioned this to Vikas earlier, the problem with us as India is we want everything cheap. And cheap means a downward spiral. Someday it will compromise your quality and you will be finished. So it is not the question of cheap, cheap, cheap. It is a question of what value you can do and how do you give the ability to afford for that. So that's the point. The other thing I want to just mention is about this mindset of value versus cost. It is not, pharma companies alone cannot do anything in this. It is the clinicians, it is the doctors, the hospitals, even they cannot do anything much. They can prescribe, but there is a system of insurance, is a system of regulator. Today, if the regulator will do price control on everything, or some of them, then there's no question of value, it's just the cost. If the insurance will compare the cost of one treatment in one hospital without going into the details of what drug it is used and what so on and on, versus another hospital in another city, it is not, there is no value based in this. It's cost. So unless the insurance starts stratifying, the regulator starts stratifying, like I'd used an example earlier, like when you buy a car, you have different kinds of car for different values. In a train, you have different sets of, the way seats are allocated. In an aircraft, different seats are allocated, economy, business, etc. They are all going from point A to point B, but there is a value in it. But can everybody afford a business class? No. So that, I think, is a point to be mentioned. But my request to all my friends here in the pharma and their leaders and many, they're the people who influence the industry, is that when you move, it's very nice to say value, value, value. It's very nice. But India also needs Ayushman Bharat. India also needs CGHS. And India also needs the private insurance. And I'm not going to, I'm just going to say one last comment, which you talked about, the private equity. I believe the problem with all of us here is we say healthcare business. Problem is, it is not a healthcare business. I always call it healthcare sector, and I urge all of you to call healthcare sector, because we cannot profit by, somebody's illness. So I don't think that's appropriate.
Absolutely great point. Yeah, thanks so much for clarifying on that. Yeah, in fact, it touches lives, and that's where all the difference is made. Again, starting from you, Sanjiv sir. We have seen this whole industry actually, kind of becoming so big. It's global now, and lots of companies come to India calling it the pharmacy of the world. Internally, what has kept the industry probably in control, not going haywire on pricing, partly was NPPA. You will differ on that. So how do you see this going forward, as Khanna sir mentioned about the need for value? The costs are going up, cell and gene therapies will come. Lots of companies are actually talking about it as the first line treatment going forward. There are bispecific antibodies, radiopharmaceuticals. The treatment paradigm has changed. So has been the case for any other chronic therapies. When you have these innovation-led products coming in, as he mentioned that, there is requirement for a Jan Aushadhi, there is requirement for a, Jan Arogya Yojana. Lots of hospitals have actually opted out of the government insurance scheme because the costs are not viable. How do you see that balance coming in? We are in a very different territory.
So first thing first, I think Sudarshan is here with me. Both of us have fought hard for years together to prove that NPPA is not the reason for price being in control in this country at all. At all. It's the competition and the quality of industry that has maintained the prices in this country. And we should take this notion out of our mind that NPPA really helps to control prices in this country. Absolutely not. I think we have to be very careful in understanding this, and enough papers we have published together. With IIM Ahmedabad, with several bodies we have published papers to prove that. We've also proved that price is not access. Otherwise, a 50 paisa iron tablet would have not caused any anemia in this country. So I think we also need to understand that facts are on the table to prove that. But you ask a very, in a way, a delightful question of how this balance can be sought. And innovation, you mentioned about innovation. Let me put a model in a couple of minutes for you, which I am experimenting with, and allowing us to understand how access, innovation, everything can run together. And therefore, we can create enough balance in the system. Dr. Ranga is here. He has been part of the approval process of an innovative biologic that we had on Rh negative women, mother treatment. When we realized that we have one of the biggest things that happened in the country, that we have an innovative biologic to be launched in this country, we went about it very differently than what a normal organization would want to do. Price was secondary. I think our pricing is much lower than the global pricing of a human cell-derived product, so which is even backward in technology. So, first of all, I think we went realizing that access can be created only through awareness, because not enough blood typing is done in this country. How do we encourage blood typing in this country? And for that, we created a field force. We didn't go so much to the doctors as much as went to district hospitals and smaller villages and smaller places to create awareness around it. We tied up with agrochemical companies to go into rural areas to promote blood typing in this country, especially for pregnant women. Now we have the government who has put up central government has put up a nice portal with everything to be, every pregnant woman has to be notified there in a different way. So there is a lot that is happening now. And we tied up with state governments to buy the medicine rather than trying to only say that we'll approach it private market. Whatever adjustments we needed to do in pricing, we did. Today, nearly we can claim that about 70 to 75% women in this country, which is equal to what vaccine treatment is, get access to Rh negative treatment. And that just shows that in 5 years' time, the amount of access we have created in this country, very quietly, very nicely. And innovation happened in this country in frugal innovation. So the pricing is also not high. On top of it, when we are now talking to US FDA gives us music to our ears by saying that you actually have brought an unmet medical need, because the US population is getting worse treatment than the Indian women. So innovation can happen, pricing can be managed, access can be managed. If we put the bigger picture on hand, that what problem are we solving, and not say that we are going to launch a drug and we want this price. That's not the motive of any drug. As Gautam said, really, you know, every drug, unless the drug reaches the patient, it has no value. So creating value is ensuring that treatment rates go up in this country, the disease burden goes down, we have more people who can participate in the growth of economy. Those things are far bigger things. And if we keep that in mind, as we remain in this industry, I think we will solve the problem of access, price, and value together.
Yeah. Right. Your turn, Rehan. The balance between value and cost. You know, he's dismantled the need for price controls, and you know, I have seen how many companies have actually gone out of business because they were not able to keep up with the API prices, you know, going down, and the costs went haywire. So, your experience, what do you want to do going forward, maybe with the next Keytruda?
So I think two or three things. It's not just like Gautam said, it's not just a price of a product or even delivery. Because if you look at access, look at tier 2, tier 3 cities. I grew up in a tier 3 city. There's very little access from an infrastructure point of view. Very few doctors want to go there. Even delivery of products, cold chain, etc., is getting much better, but it's not there. So I think, you know, in any kind of access of value, it's not just a price. And I think Gautam made an excellent point, which is there are multiple tiers to this. There is a first class, there is a business class, an economy class, there is a bus, there is multiple ways to do this. So even all of us who work with various types of providers, the pricing is different. Our access pricing is something like 80% off to the right type of patient, and it should be. And in other cases, it's not. You know, if, for example, there are patients who pay 50% off. So I think from an access point of view, it's a tiered type approach. And certainly, I know for our product portfolio, we'll launch more tiers. Because while we've gone 10x on patients, they should be close to 100 or 200x. I mean, there's certainly a need, like Sanjiv said, there's a massive need in the country from a patient point of view. And there are multiple ways to approach that. But there are other factors beyond just pricing that play an important role in this access.
Right. Your turn, sir. How do you see this whole effect of high-value products coming into markets like India? What interventions do you want to see?
So it will be very similar to what quite a few of my colleagues have said. But what I want to bring it across, Vikas, is disease profiles are changing. What used to be there earlier are no longer going to be today. From communicable, we are moving to non-communicable diseases. Treatment paradigms are changing. From chemical molecules, we moved to protein-based therapies. We are moving to gene-based therapies, siRNAs. Treatment paradigm is changing. For India, it's also important that we have to bring all the stakeholders together to keep patient in the center and ensure that how every patient who requires a treatment can get a treatment. And there's not going to be one solution or one partner who takes the entire onus of ensuring that these things gets provided. It needs to be government, pharma companies, doctors, patient bodies, state governments, all coming together with the same goal. That how do we ensure that newer treatments with better patient outcomes are being able to be provided to all. I have a bit of a difference from the analogy of travel from one destination to another. Travel cannot be computed with health. Health is completely different, and every person should get the best health outcomes that is required for him. If he cannot afford it, that shouldn't be a reason why he cannot get the best health outcome. And that's where all stakeholders have to come together to find out a win solution. And it cannot be just one party or one stakeholder who needs to work on it. So that would be my take on the access solution.
Right. Sir, I'll come to you a little later, but Alpana, you have been fighting a court battle also regarding allocated fund for rare diseases. There is a fund that was created for about 950 crore or 1,000 crore, and now it's been stayed by a court order. That's another set of challenges. How do you want to narrate that experience?
We had a win, which was kind of landmark. It was a landmark judgment at Delhi High Court where 974 plus crore was allocated to rare diseases. We had petitioned in Delhi High Court. And as a patient advocacy group, we have been working very closely with all the stakeholders. And we realized that once we get all the stakeholders together on a platform, we can get this solution. It's until unless we don't try to get solution, just going and saying our problem is not going to help. That win was, but we have a major setback now because government has taken a stay order in the Supreme Court. We have filed the interjection in Supreme Court, and we are waiting for the positive outcome for this. Having said that, at the policy level advocacy, as we talk about, a policy level intervention is required, not just for rare diseases, for across the diseases. And I would also like to give one example here. There can be innovative ways of doing things. Like pharma companies are doing their bit, there are compassionate use programs, there are different free drug programs, but not every patient can have access to through free drug program. But we have to get the healthcare practitioners, everyone. And on this, there is another example where, I'll congratulate and thank Gautam ji as well. At Hinduja Hospital, we have a SMA clinic. So for many of the diseases, we require multidisciplinary approach where all the specialists, the doctors need to come together. And we have a SMA clinic at Nair, BLBI Nair Hospital as well. So when we talk about affordability, there are patients who can go to BLBI Nair Hospital, and there are patients who can go to Hinduja, which is again at a highly discounted rate. And so if we come, if we try to get to the solution mode where we get all the stakeholders, there can be in a similar way. If there can be, when we talk about rather than cost of treatment, if we see the value to life as, each and every value, each life is precious, and our children with SMA and many other diseases, they have very bright future. They can contribute to economies. So we are trying to target now CSR and many other, along with government, probably will need much more support from everyone sitting here to come together and help us win this battle. So thanks so much, Vikas.
Right. Yes, so just about time enough for one or two questions from the house. Anyone wants to ask a quick question, a short one, then we can put it across to our panelists.
I'm Dr. Manish Paul. A quick question to the panel. Dr. Ranga did mention about the levels, or whatever the statistics of the US versus India. Now, when we are deciding on HbA1c or anything, when it create a drug for a value, do we have any data of the Indian statistics essentially to determine it, or do we normally go with the Western statistics and then decide the pricing and the volumes that go around? It's for the panel.
Rehan, sir, you want to take it?
So I think, to your point, initially there is a price that is negotiated by country, usually. I've worked at other companies as well, not just this one, not just in business. But the point is not that price. The point is, if you say, okay, well, there's a price X, how do I broaden the access? And the only way to broaden that access is to be able to, using products, usually you don't want to cut the price because that creates lots of issues in any multinational. The product can flow to other countries, etc. Then you can say, okay, well, how do I figure that out? So, Sanjiv mentioned, a third party that could be used basically to provide support to the patient. We do that. We have 100 call center folks that help patients access that price. You agree what price that patient will pay, and then you provide that price. So there is no objective one size fits all. You may have a pricing, and then you say, okay, how do I build an access program to increase that access? And that includes lots of different pieces of support to do that.
The key points here, again, the uniqueness of the country requires, our own frugal innovation. We had Tata Memorial speaking about, the kind of interventions that have actually meant so much of a difference. Sanjiv sir, you mentioned about the detection levels that went up significantly because of your own drive. I feel a lot is there in this market. It's 1.4 billion. That itself is a huge opportunity, and now part of mankind. In my several conversations, I've heard Rajiv Juneja speak about this a lot, that our country itself is so big and scattered that there is a lot of opportunity. Mankind's revenue is 98% India. So there is a lot to be done here, both for MNCs and Indian companies, with that value proposition in mind. So hopefully this was enriching experience to hear all our experts. Maybe, at a later time, probably you'll be able to exchange notes and learn more from them. Thank you so much for being a great audience.